Hello world and welcome back to, or welcome to, the popculturepatter podcast. As always, I'm your host, Callum Brown, and today's guest is Scottish filmmaker Paul Morris. I reached out to Paul on social media right at the beginning of starting this podcast after being introduced by our mutual friend David Morgan, and I'm glad that we had a chance to sit down for a chat. Paul and I get into it about his feature-length debut film, Angry Young Men, which premiered at the Glasgow Film Festival on the 9th of March 2022. You can find Paul's film on YouTube by searching Angry Young Men or Marlowe Films, or follow the link in the description below. So head on over, give it a watch, smash that like button and let them know that Pop Culture Patter sent you. As always, this podcast is recorded with our good friends at the Podcast Studio Glasgow, the only podcast studio in Scotland which offers 18 years of experience in the medium and ran by a pioneer in British podcasting. For more information or to book a session, please visit www.podcaststudioglasgow.com. And before we get into this episode, here's a quick word from our sponsor.
This podcast is brought to you by Brown & Co Properties, an award-winning family-run estate agency based in Whitburn, West Lothian. With a Property Mark protected service for a fixed fee, we are your go-to agent for expert property sales advice in the area. Get on the go with Brown & Co.
Paul Morris, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, mate.
First of all, how are you?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
I'm not too bad, thank you. The first person that's ever asked me that. This isn't your first time on a podcast, but do you listen to any podcasts in particular?
I do. I like WTF, the Mark Maron one. I listened to one called it's Nicola Talent. She's an Irish journalist and she does a lot of sort of true crime, like gang crime. Just sort of like partly research and partly just curiosity. What's it called? It's not true crime, but it's something crime podcast. What else do I listen to? There's one with like Jason Segel and Jason Bateman. Sorry, can't remember what it's called, but just mostly sort of like if it's guests that I'm interested in, I'll sort of just seek it out. Really, that's my main thing.
Yeah. Do you ever watch the John Bernthal one, Real Ones?
No, but I like him.
That for me is he just gets real people on and just talks to them, and he had Shia LaBeouf on, and
that's right. I heard about that.
It was such a great episode. I love Shia, so
he sort of brought him in just at sort of. Was it like pre or like just as it was all bubbling up with his controversy, and then he sort of gave him a chance?
I think it was just like tell your story, and he took accountability over it all, and fair play. That's what it's for. And it's just a shame that people are cancelling him, but you never know.
I know. Who knows, mate?
Hollywood.
I know.
You've just announced that you're going to be a dad for the first time as well, so congratulations.
Thank you, mate. Thank you.
How was that?
It's good, mate. It's an amazing thing. Like, I've always sort of wanted a chance to be a dad, and like, I'm just quite like a big child myself. So I'm really looking forward to it. I mean, I don't know if I can fully comprehend what will be involved. Do you know what I mean in terms of like sleep and responsibility? But I'm up for it. And we'll see what happens. I'll be there regardless.
Yeah, that's amazing. What did you do to celebrate it? Did you do the reveal thing that people do, or?
So I found out in December, and then we just sort of went round like our families and stuff like that and told them, which was really nice. But the christening will probably be a big one. Whenever that happens, that'll probably be the big celebration time.
Outside of film, do you have any pop culture interests? I know my pop culture interests are kind of up there, but do you have any of your own?
I do. I think I'll go. I'm just looking at your icons here. I do like obviously music and stuff like films, and going to the gym. I listen to a lot of ASMR as well, like every night and like every day, pretty much just the relaxation stuff. I play online chess.
Nice.
And that's pretty much it. I used to sort of play the Xbox quite a lot, but not so much in recent years. But yeah, films is pretty much it for me, and like reading and things like that.
Yeah. Are you like currently binging anything or reading anything?
I'm currently reading a book called Difficult Men, and it's about the writers' rooms, like behind the scenes of Sopranos, Breaking Bad, The Wire, and it's a really, really good book, because it sort of goes behind and shows you like all these showrunners like David Chase, David Simon, and just shows you the careers and like what was going on. Like apparently, I didn't realise this, but James Gandolfini would like God rest him, but he would disappear for days on end. Like apparently they shut down an airport, and there's a Friday night shoot, and it's it's Furio. Did you watch The Sopranos? Have you seen it?
Yeah.
So you know,
Huge fan.
So Furio's last scene was the one they actually shot. Remember he was going to push Tony into the propeller blades, you know, like steaming, because he was in love with Carmela and he was disrespecting her. So that was the last scene he was going to shoot, and this was a Friday, and James Gandolfini was nowhere to be seen. So they shut down an airport and everything, and it was just sort of that point understood that he'll do this sometimes. And I think the character was really getting to him. It was really in his head, and he had to play this role. And obviously, you saw how convincing he was, and he was this sort of like all or nothing type of guy. And he disappeared for like 4 days, and he turned up at a nail bar in Brooklyn with no money in his pocket, and had to phone like the studio and get someone to come pick him up. And they got divorced and all that. And apparently, like I think he was living the role in a lot of ways, and not in a sort of like not in a gratuitous way, but it just seemed like it really affected him. Like he was like bevying and like I don't know, taking gear, whatever. I don't really know, but they sort of brushed over that, and just understanding like all these things that could have fell apart during these great series and all the things that they were up against, studios and all that. It's fascinating. So that's a great book I'm reading. And what am I watching? I watched White Lotus, the second season.
Right,
Really
I've started to watch that.
It was really good.
It's on my list.
And like Succession, obviously that's not been. That's due to start back again. I think it's the last season. Love that. And The House of the Dragon, I really, really loved that. But it's interesting as well. Like, see all these great series. I think one of the things that's carrying a lot of them, or not carrying it because the writing's phenomenal, but they've all got these amazing scores. Like, see, if you watch White Lotus and watch Succession, they've all got these beautiful music that just seems to create this different mood. And it's like current TV is just like elevated so high because they're thinking about all these things that didn't used to be a part of TV. And it seems like every department, like everything, cinematography and all that, everyone's just up in their game and the writing's so good. It's just phenomenal.
Absolutely, and that's been for a good long time now. I think TV's just been so good, and I guess The Sopranos was probably the first one. That and The Wire were probably the two that kind of launched TV into people being like taking note of it.
Well, that's what they talk about in this book. He talks about it being like the third golden age. Like there was this time when TV was obviously invented, but then when they got to this point, it was all about like kind of HBO coming on the scene, because networks were scared to have these anti-heroes and having these characters who weren't particularly nice. They weren't these handsome, clean-cut men who were good people, and there wasn't a moral message. But then because HBO came in and it was subscription-based, they were more interested in, right, okay, what won't the networks show? Because we don't need to worry about ratings. We've got subscribers, and it's almost they chased like quality over like viewership. And then you just started getting like, I think Oz was like one of the first ones. And then Sopranos, The Wire was out like a couple of years after, but they got like 2 Emmys nominated over the 5 years, and no viewership, and nobody was interested in The Wire. Sopranos was getting all the heat, and then you look at what's came after it, Breaking Bad and everything else. It just blows your mind. Yeah,
even Band of Brothers as well. I think that was HBO as well, and there was another Pacific. Both of them were fantastic, and just an insight into that world as well. But I would think as an actor, like it'd be quite cool to do a season or a series. You're getting to spend more time with the character that you're playing. I would think that would be more appealing to me rather than just doing a movie. You know what I mean? You get to spend more time. You get to make completely different decisions in that character, and you get to live the character for a while. But would you ever fancy doing a TV series yourself?
In terms of like, writing, directing, I would. I mean, I love writing. I love the idea of getting a writer's room together and having people. That's one of the other interesting things about this book, Difficult Men. It's like, how do you combine all these different writers? Because I've got writer friends and they're all like amazing, but we've all got quite different tastes. But one of the things they talk about is in these writers' rooms, a lot of the showrunners treated them quite badly. But it's that thing. It's like in The Sopranos. Like, remember when Tony's out the game, and like Silvio steps up to be the acting boss, and then after, in fact, it might not even be linked to that, but it's like Tony turns around and says, "You've got no fucking idea what it's like to be number one. Like you don't know. It's like heavy's the head that wears the crown." And it seems like that in these writers' room. Like it's your voice, and all these amazing writers are subservient to your voice. Do you mean they're not writing their idea of a hit show? Like Matthew Weiner, I think that's how you say his name. He was a producer and a writer on The Sopranos. Then he went and did Mad Men, which is obviously a different show. But you get these great writers, and I think that's like a fascinating thing if you could put that together. And TV's doing so well just now that it could be something to think about.
That's really interesting because normally sometimes you find people like yourself just it's their vision and they don't let anybody kind of influence it. So it's quite interesting. You're open to ideas, and like I had James on the other week, and I was kind of saying to him, would you collaborate and bring ideas? And he seems open to it as well. So like you never know, maybe you can pull something from each other, and like that's what's you might think of something, and then somebody else might come in and be like, right, here's where we can go with that after or whatever, and you're like, I didn't think of that. It's amazing. That's what's cool about these rooms.
And think about, even say for example, so the showrunner would set the premise and perhaps have an idea for the shapes. I think the initial shape of Sopranos was like, might have been a feature film, because I think Chase wanted to make a feature. And he thought, like, if this doesn't get picked up, I hope it doesn't get picked up, and I'll just use this material and then give me some extra money, I'll make it into a feature. So that initial shape was the mothers trying to kill him and help with the uncle. So they had that initial shape, and then after that, I think season 2, they didn't really know what was going to happen. So I think if you're the showrunner and you have this premise, and then you might have that like locked solid, and it's your voice, and like the characters wouldn't say this, but if you get these great writers in, it's like, well, what about this character over here? You're not really using them, you're not utilising them. What about that? Especially even like, I think it's a great thing, even just like the diversity that's coming in as well. And it's like these characters who perhaps wouldn't have had the airtime or had the voice, and certain people can't speak for them. But if you had a diverse room, these people could be like, oh, well, what if this happens? And that could just enrich it if the writing quality is good. You know what I mean? It could only be a good thing.
It's like Casino. Scorsese with the hitmen scene. He was like, he brung in these consultants who were clearly hitmen back in the day, and was like, right, teach the actors how to do this like real, and they just weren't getting it. And he was like, just you guys do it in the film, and all the hits in the film are done by hitmen.
Jeez,
because it's just, you can tell, because it's like the way they shoot them, and like bag over the head after the hammer to the neck and all that. It was just wild.
I think authenticity is such a huge thing, and like you said, you might not, like, I didn't know that, but it felt authentic, and I think when it's done right, you kind of understand that. And I think when it's done in the vein of what's came before it, like for example, if you see mob rip-offs or you see mafia films that are clearly just people who have loved mafia films, so they're taking influence from that, so it's sort of like a watered down version of it. But then if there's people who draw it from a real life example, or they use sort of truth in that, it feels real and it feels a lot different.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you check out Many Saints in New York?
Yeah, I did.
I liked it.
I liked it as well.
Yeah, I thought it was quite cool to see and interesting to see, and it was great that they gave his son a chance to play him as that's amazing, man.
I thought he was so good, and I loved that sign of Tony. I wanted there's so many things, like when I heard it was getting made, that I wanted to see like young Jackie Aprile and young Tony like sticking up Feature's card game, and like I wanted to see him become, but obviously that's not what the film was about. It was like him just as a kind of scared boy in like his formative years. But I just thought there's so much rich material and backstory in The Sopranos. I would have loved to have seen it.
I know, and they could easily do more,
of course,
which would be amazing. But I don't know whether that film did that well for them to be like, right, we've got something here. But even a trilogy, and he's got time to grow older a bit and get a bit more like young, old Gandolfini. But
it's funny, but because I was saying this to my mates when I heard it was going to happen, I was like, this will be interesting, because when we come into The Sopranos, like, I kind of forgot it as well, but like Tony's not the boss. It was Jackie that was the boss. He was the number one. So it'd be interesting to see, would it even be the same sort of Tony? Do you mean, because he'd be like kicking up, he'd be a captain, the same as like Paulie or Sil or these guys would be.
Yeah.
So he wouldn't be this he wouldn't be a young Don. He would be this ballsy guy who obviously made his name quite young. But it would be interesting to see, and would you want to see that, like him as number 2? But who knows?
I know. They could easily go down the route of doing it as a TV show.
Oh, and easily, man.
Gives Gandolfini's son a chance to, you know, get a bit of a career as well. I don't know what he's doing now, if he's still doing it.
I think he's acting.
Is he? Great.
I thought he'd done a great job.
Absolutely, yeah. Big shoes to fill as well. So you and I haven't actually met until today, and I just wanted to mention how it came about that we got introduced to each other, and it was through a mutual friend, David Morgan. Shout out to David.
Shout out David from Canada.
So thank you, David, for putting this together. But I'd reached out to you on Instagram maybe when I was like very early stages, like maybe episode 1 or episode 2 was out. You had no right to come back to me and be like, I'll come on your podcast. But I mean, that was probably 6 or 7 weeks ago, and we've finally got to sit down, which is amazing. There's been a few stumbling blocks.
COVID and the rest.
But for those of you out there that don't know, Paul was the writer, director, editor, cinematographer, producer, production designer, co-writer of the score, and even starred in the film Angry Young Men, which premiered at the Glasgow Film Festival last year on the 9th of March, which was nearly a year ago.
Over a year ago.
Are you sick of talking about Angry Young Men? Yeah.
Well, it's funny because it's been so long, and that I've been working on other things. It's a bit of distance now, because I think I did quite a lot at the time. And a lot of people hadn't seen it, or it was sort of like I was talking about the festival and things like that. So it's quite nice to come back to it with a year distance, because the Glasgow Film Festival's been and gone again, you know,
Yeah.
which is crazy.
And did seeing Dog Days a couple of weeks ago, did that set you back to, because that probably would have been near enough the anniversary of a year, maybe?
It was.
Which is wild. And did that throw back memories of that night for you?
It did. So that was James's was it like 1:30? What time was it? 3:30 or something?
Half 3, yeah.
3:30. So we had ours was like midweek and like 6 o'clock. So it was a different sort of like it was a different atmosphere. That sometimes when I went back to Glasgow, I would get a wee bit like anxious at that time, because it kind of reminded me of it, because it was quite stressful. But when I was back then, I think there was enough distance. And I was like just so happy, like James was up there and he was doing his thing. I was just kind of looking forward to seeing the film, which was nice.
Yeah, I know. I absolutely was blown away. I'm gutted that I didn't know of the film at the time to go and see it in the big screen. Angry Young Men, I was meaning. But seeing James's Dog Days, like, it made me think, oh fuck, I wish I was there for Paul's thing, because it would have been great to see that in the big screen.
Especially when it's like a young filmmaker or someone that there's so much goodwill, and people that want you to do well, even people that aren't like big film buffs, that are people that are just like enjoy films, but they thought that they kind of champion you, which we felt like on the night. Just the atmosphere. I think obviously James felt it as well. There's just so many people that want it to be great, and they're there with it's a great audience to be with.
Yeah, and it was just such a good experience for me, because I'd never been to it. I'd messaged you like the night before, being like, "What the fuck do I wear? Do I wear a suit, or what do I wear?"
Premiere as well. I know you don't know.
Yeah, I just ended up going dressed like what Cameron Jack's character looked like in Dog Days. It was a leather jacket, black and all black. I never actually bumped into you that night, but I'm quite glad, because it's the first time we get to meet today. But I'm sorry that I'm late to the party for Angry Young Men, but
no problem.
You had your hands in every piece of this film. Is that something that you'll continue to do, or do you think was that kind of training to gain the knowledge and how to do all that stuff, or was it just, this is my baby and that's what I want to do?
I think just it wasn't meant as training. I tried to open it up to as many people as possible, and I tried to get like people on board, and I sort of cast the net and said, look, if you want to help out in any sort of way. But it just so happened the way it was, obviously no budget, and the way it was shot over like kind of sporadic times, like weekends and months apart and all the rest of it. We didn't have a solid crew. It was just like me, Kieran Smith, my AD, and a few other people just kind of came and helped out. But it was great training, like, as a byproduct of that. So I kind of did every department. But obviously there are people who that's their bread and butter and their sole focus. So ideally what you would do is you'd have an opinion and you could discuss these departments. You wouldn't be just totally blind saying, I don't know, you tell me what's right.
Yeah.
But they would have all this skill behind them and all this experience. So I'd like to collaborate with people and have a DP and have production designer, a costume designer, but be able to say, here's what I want and here's why I want it.
Yeah. And is there any way that there's like a pool of people that are wanting to get involved in film? Like, is there anything that's like a group that everybody's got that you can be like, right, you've got experience in this, do you want to come help me with this? Is there anything like that in Scotland at all?
There's like a Facebook page, but it's kind of a mixed bag, because it's just sort of like a lot of it's like actors and stuff like that, which was good because we did meet people through that, and a lot of people came and helped. But in terms of crew, it's hard because they might be like up and coming, or they might be aspiring, whatever, you know what I mean? But then if you've got a sort of genuine crew, they're more like tradesmen. Do you mean like they probably work and they probably get paid their day rate, and it's quite expensive, and if you're not going to get paid, a lot of them won't be able to do it, which I understand. And then there's also the thing where it's like a lot of people who are in these pages or in these groups want to be writer directors, so it's sort of you're just talking to yourself really. So it's difficult, but hopefully if you get a budget behind you, then you can hire these people, and that's sort of where you'll be able to pick and collaborate properly.
Yeah, I know, and I know that it spent the 5 years and a day to put it all together, and you used your own equipment that you built up over time. And when you look at the budget, it wasn't actually, you'd already had the equipment, so there was such a small budget for the film. And I heard you talking in another podcast about the only thing you would change would be removing the cars from the scenery. But we're not asking for people to like donate 500,000 towards a film for a budget, but like give people help that are making stuff like this. You know what I mean? There should be some sort of like go-to, like a guru that can be like, right, we'll maybe give you £1,000, you can start off like a business gateway kind of thing. Like if you're starting a business, there's people there to be like, right, here's how to guide you on what to do, here's your market, and here's seminars and all that. There's nothing like that for film. Like,
it's hard as well because even that, like 500 grand is like buttons for a film, which is mad. Do you know what I mean? So it's not even like you can give a small amount, because I think a lot of the time it's like you're either going to do it or you're not. So people aren't given small amounts because it would be spent within like seconds. Do you know what I mean? So it's almost like you need to have this big commitment or nothing at all. But I think part of me is like, yes, yeah, like I wish I could have funding and I wish I could get this and that. But if you view it like it was a business, say if it was a startup and you went to the bank and asked for a loan, you know, it's a hard one, because if you're going to make that financial commitment, people get people to answer to if it's like a funding body or as a business person, you know, and they talk about, you know, then it's like, what stars have you got? Let me see the script. Is it marketable? You know, how's it going to be shown? You know, it's expensive to put it in theatres, and then whatever your budget is for the film, it's like a rule of thumb, you have to double that for what your marketing would be. So it's almost like there's so many things to consider. But then again, if you do it with no money, then you're loose to kind of do whatever you want, and you might not get the end polished result, but you're going to have the best experience in terms of figuring out what you like and what you don't like and what worked.
Yeah, and that's a lot of outside noise to have to compete with, and I think filmmakers getting involved with studios, I don't know what that's like, but I can imagine that it's people being like, nah, that's not right, and try to change your vision. Like, how do you get people to be creative and just let them go and be creative and give them money to do so? Because for me, there's seeing your films and seeing James's films, you know what I mean? Like, why are these people not getting funding? Like, we're not asking for a huge amount of money, just something to tide us over, because there's people to feed.
No,
as well, you know what I
know.
mean? And you want to pay people for doing it. There's only so much, as you've probably experienced, by asking people to do stuff for free. There's only so much you can really ask of them before being like, mate, I know you're doing me a favour here, but I just think like there needs to be something sorted. Let creative people drive this country. You know what I mean?
Then again, it's hard as well, because then it's like Scotland has just been like, it's been getting budget cuts left, right, and centre with the sort of Creative Scotland. But then it's hard as well, because it's the easiest argument to shoot down. It's like, so we should be using, when there's people starving and when we're using food banks, we should be giving $1 million to this filmmaker, and then it failed. And like, how much money did it make? And then people are like, okay, we're going to take a loss. But I've kind of said that before. I think you just need to write off a certain amount and just say, you know what, profit isn't the goal, which is like a mad thing to say. It's almost like we're building a sort of like we're building a system here. We're building a community. We're building like tradition here. This is going to be written off, and if it does well, great. It seems like Ireland's doing pretty well. In France, they've got the right idea, and they sort of produce filmmakers. And I mean, the art itself should be the sort of result, you know, rather than like the financial. But that's a tough argument to have, isn't it?
Yeah. Would you ever consider going over to Ireland and taking a wee bit of time over there and taking advantage of the services there, or is it just one of those things? You've probably given yourself all the experience by doing everything in the film anyway. So
I think I don't even know how that would work, you know, if you weren't even a citizen. And I just think that I'm quite comfortable in terms of like, I'm going to write my scripts and I'm going to make my films, and take it from there. And if it gets funding based on the strength of the script, really, and just sort of treat it more like I've got something to offer. Like I think one of the hardest things to do is like networking. And I've been to a few of them. I was part of a TV thing in Edinburgh called The Network. And you go to these mixers, and I've been to like ones at like festivals, and I'm sure all the people are really nice, but it's just such like a transactional thing. It's like, why would somebody want to listen to me speak? Am I going there to sell or to pitch? So my idea now is just have something to offer, and then if people are there who would like to see it or like the sound of it and want to know more, take it from there. And I think that I think you need to sort of cut yourself off and realise it is like show business. You know, you have to sort of have something to offer in there. It's everyone's question is what's in it for me, you know.
Yeah, and shit, man.
It is as well, but then if you accept that and you can still be creative and you're okay with that and you kind of get it, we're not the first people. Nothing's really changed in that respect. It's been the same since the sort of medium started. You know, it's always been a business. So I think that comes just with like maturity and understanding. Okay, here is the lay of the land, but I'm okay with that, and my goal is just to make the best stuff I can.
Yeah, there's too much funding into these blooming Marvel movies and stuff like that. And you know, I was a fan of them back when, and I checked out at Endgame, but you know, I'd read comic books from being a kid, and you know, if you told me that in future there's going to be hundreds Marvel movies made or superhero movies made, I'd be like, amazing. But now I'm like, fuck that. Like, it's just the same cookie cutter shit all the time, and it's just like, why? They've got huge budgets. Like, even give 5% of that away to independents or something like that.
But that's the thing, though. It's not. That's when, like, we're talking about saying just give a small amount of money to this film. people want to gamble big, they want to win big, they want $1 billion one, they don't. I mean, I'm speaking for them. I don't know, but the idea that you would just give like a certain amount, because when you look at the amount of money, like you say, is going into films, you think to yourself, oh, but if we can make 10 quality films, give people a budget of like $500,000, and make local actors, just make it about story, how you use the camera, performance, writing. You know, if you could do that, like After Sun, the Charlotte Wells film, which I thought was phenomenal.
Yeah, fantastic.
And you look at that, and that's obviously really well made. I don't know what the budget was or anything like that, but you see so many of these films, you just think, why is this not happening for filmmakers? Like this is like the perfect thing of what you want from this idea of like a small fund and then just great technique.
And the Oscar buzz that came around that as well, you know what I mean? Like the film that won the Oscars everywhere.
Everything all at once.
Yeah, tongue twister. But like that's obviously had a huge budget into it. That you can't really class that as an independent, but it was A24 that did it. You know what I mean? And
I don't know. See, I don't, because it's so confusing. Because I said this before as well when I was researching like no budget filmmaking, a low budget. People would be like, "Oh yeah, I think we had like 2 million for it," and they'd be describing that as like a no budget film. So it's really hard to quantify it. And I think that even like that, I think it was classed as like a low budget indie film. But I mean, I just see, to be honest, like see when I just try and shut all that out, because it's like it's always been the same. It's not going to change. So you just need to kind of do your thing and then hope you meet the right people.
That's great, but you can see that at the Oscars, everything was kind of, they're not big, huge budget movies that are at the Oscars now. It's After Sun was there, Banshees of Inisherin. I don't think that had a huge budget either. But you know, like the movies that are kind of set around that kind of low budget, they're not low budget compared to what you're doing. Like, have you ever been tempted about going across the pond and trying over there?
Oh, I've got my auntie stays in California, so
perfect.
The only, I mean, that would be, I suppose that would be good. But then, like, the kind of older I get, like when I'm writing, I'm sort of writing for Scottish voices, but like, I love American films and like I love all kind of films. But I mean, I would do something like that. I would write maybe for a voice that wasn't my own, but I just feel like I've got stuff to say and I've got characters I want to see, and I just feel there's a deep well here that I kind of want to tap into, and I just think there's like great performers and just people who have studied acting and perhaps been disheartened, or you know, or any sort of like craft that's to do with filmmaking, and I just feel like there's a lot to do here. It's not a crusade on my part, you know. It's not a sort of a noble thing. It's just the kind of way I feel in the stories I'm writing. But I love all kinds of films, so who knows, man.
I mean, that's inspiring, man, that you're not being like head in the clouds. You know, you've got the stories you want to tell, and that's fucking amazing. Did you ever go down the crowdfunding route? Like, did you ever think, nah?
That was like a kind of hard no for me. Like, really, and the reason was, I just feel like making it a let's rally around, and like maybe it's my own sort of like defensiveness or whatever, but it's more like I just didn't want it to be like a sort of charity case or like like a school show, but it's like everyone's like, oh, well done, like that's a sort of merit thing. It's almost like, no, what have you got, what can you do, and what are people willing to do, you know, rather than saying, you know, I've got nothing against people to do it, and you know, who knows what would happen in the future if I would ever do that. But I just kind of felt like I've got my camera, I've got my core cast, and whatever else I get, that's what I'm going to go with.
Yeah, I know, that's amazing, because I think that you've given yourself you've tested the waters in a lot of ways to gain all the knowledge for this. I mean, you were saying you've done college courses, working as a runner for the BBC, you've done extra work, you've tried out for the Royal Conservatoire, you did stand-up, making sketches with your friend, the network group that you took part in, and even watching DVD commentaries and YouTube interviews. Like, it sounds like you've been a student of the game and kind of tried to learn everything as much as you can. And what I want to know is what helped the most that you've learned out of all of that to make Angry Young Men?
Doing it, making films, making shorts, writing things and just testing it with an audience. Like when we done sketches and made our shorts, it was just for people that I knew that were in my friends list, you mean, on Facebook and Twitter or whatever, you know, on my social media. And that was like the biggest buzz. Like, I remember like being out with like Miller and like my best mates like Miller and Roy and stuff like that, and doing like a dolly shot on the back of someone's boot and doing it with like a pant and feeling like you'd invented the medium. Do you know what I mean? Like that feeling. So that was the kind of richest thing. And then just non-stop, just like reading interviews and biographies and reading about films. So it's just sort of constant immersion really on my part, just because I do love it. It's not from a sort of like time to educate yourself. I just want to know everything I can. So that has all sort of helped in a big way. But making things, I suppose, is where you see the biggest progress.
Yeah, and you acted in the film as well. Was it easy for you because you wrote the words? Was it easy to remember? Was it just like kind of like camera on, right, one take?
I think so. It wasn't always like one take. I think because if I heard a car going by or anything like that, if I knew the audio was going to get clipped, if the camera wasn't the right bit, if the light changed, it's got so many concerns. People's time. You've got your producer hat on as well. Not because I'm like, oh, I've got this title of producer. Like, I don't think like that. But it's almost like I knew I was responsible for getting the day done. So I was thinking about quite a few other things. But because I wrote the words, and like I perform it when I'm sort of like writing it, stuff like that, and here's how it should feel. It was quite natural because we'd done a lot before. Like me and my mates, it was kind of second nature.
Which is amazing because I was trying to merge it into this for me. Like I've written an episode and I've kind of tailored out what I want to say, but still I'm like having to look at it and be like, keep one eye. I'm like the guy with the squint eyes. I'm like, keep my eye on you and being like, what am I asking next? But
because you've got that variable as well, because you can't predict how it's going to go or like where the topic's going to go, and you don't know your get. I mean, there's always going to be that. You can plan so much, but then you need to hit record, and then it's like it's up to the gods, isn't it?
I know, and I think it's just more the uncomfortableness of the cameras. If you look around us, there's hundreds of them.
I know, some self.
Is acting something that you would still want to pursue?
No, it's not something where I'm like, when's my next acting job, really? If someone had asked me to be in something they thought I was right for, perhaps, but it's like writing and directing is really what I want to do.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing. And you were in Burniston as well. You had a wee cameo in that.
No, a few wee bits in like one of the specials, which was good.
How was that experience, seeing that from that point of view? Was it quite cool to see behind the scenes?
It was. I mean, you'd probably be surprised how many shows, like Scottish shows and all that, are filmed with like a stripped back setup. You don't walk into a huge set really. It's like location work a lot of the time. It's really just the writing and the performances, and then obviously there's a director. But I mean, I suppose the crew size is different, but it was quite similar to, obviously they're like a legit TV show, but stuff that I'd been working on, you realise that it is a camera, it is sound, and it's what you're capturing really. That's the basics. But I've been amongst other things. Like when I was like a wee guy, I went down to the National with my dad, and my dad's pal was an actor, and he was in a play and he took us like backstage and all that at the National Theatre. So that was like amazing. But when you're seeing filming done, you realise that it is just like the camera, and they'll like light it properly and get the audio right really, and just see what you can get, which is kind of like it's quite encouraging as well, I suppose. Like you don't realise there's not a magic sauce really.
Yeah, and you bought like a crane as well, and you had the kind of the Steadicam kind of, you call it dolly? Is that what you call it?
It's a gimbal, but it's gimbal. Like a Steadicam, pretty much a Steadicam and a drone and all that.
How is it using all of them? Because a drone, you're filming way up high, something comes into shot that you don't want there. Does it take quite a while to get used to? Or
well, I'm pretty comfortable on it because I do a lot of like corporate stuff as well, and I do like sort of online ads, and I shoot ads for people, so I've got quite a lot of time on the camera and on the equipment. And I practice with it I did practice with it all the time, and I use it all the time, so I was pretty handy with it. So that wasn't something I thought about, but I knew that I had to get comfortable with it, and I'd been using all that equipment from like 2013. So by the time the film came, I'd been doing it for like 6 years, pretty constant. If I wasn't filming that weekend, I'd go out with the camera and practice again. So it was fine, really.
Yeah, because I mean, it elevates the film, like in a way. Like the drone shots are so cool, and even the shot with the crane in the back garden, looking over the fence at the guys at the top of the hill. It was just so nice to see, like, because you just don't expect that. Like, I don't know what I expected going into watching it. I think I was just like, it's just a guy and his mates making movies. But when I watched it, I was like, it's an actual fucking film. Like, all these shots are like totally what you would imagine, and it was just so well put together. And hats off to you, man, because like that's not easy.
No, but that was one of the things I thought of. Like, okay, we've not got X, Y, and Z in terms of polish, in terms of lights, in terms of the most high-end camera, even though it costs a good bit of money by anyone's standards. When you get into cameras, you can pay fortunes, and then by the time you hire a DP, but I thought, I've got enough equipment here that I know how to use, and I know the effect I want it to have, and I thought if I can tell a story almost like the French got like camera stylo, and it's like handwriting with the camera, if you can do that, and you can sort of like, here's where I want the audience to look, here's how I want it to move, then that's something, because that's you putting your sort of like creative stamp on the film. And I thought if we've got that, then to me, like, that's more impressive, or like, that's the stuff I enjoy, because there's like creative choices being made rather than just a static shot with a really high end camera, and it looks really polished, because that can bore you to tears. But if there's some thought behind it and it's got some sort of effect on you, then that means a lot.
Yeah, and did the project change over the 5 years? Did you think that benefited in the end, or was it the same thing from when you wrote it to filming it? Was there any changes that made over that time?
It got stripped down a wee bit in terms of like what I thought we needed. But I think that happens in any film, really, regardless of the time period it was shot over. I don't think it's obviously not the most efficient way to make a film for continuity and just morale and things like that. But you know, it was beneficial in some ways. Did it change? It didn't really. The script was the script, and the only thing it would change stuff would be streamlined or taken out. Maybe scenes would be compact, and I realised that this shot says what the dialogue says, so just take out the dialogue. But the core of the film, but it's kind of mad, because when I was talking about the film, I wrote it when I was like 26, you know, when I was like 29, when it was getting screened. So it's, I've changed a lot as a person, you know, and what I kind of felt at that time. So that's what makes me sort of excited to kind of keep writing and keep making things, because the time just goes by, and you know, by the time you even get to film it, but it's hard to tell, because by the time I was shooting it, maybe it was different from what I had in my head when I started writing it. The imagery was all there and the ideas I had for the film, but it must have had an impact at the time.
Yeah, and I think the fact that it's taken the 5 years, like you can see in the film that characters change their appearance. You know what I mean? One of the guys has a beard, Benedict didn't have a beard, and it shows you the time. But that's something that's worked unintentionally. You know what I mean? It's just so clever how it is, and I love the lack of technology in that. It was like a phone ringing, like a landline, rather than an actual mobile phone. No. There was no really any signs of anybody on their phone or whatever, and the only technology there was cars, really. I don't know if that was intentional or...
That was. Because the idea was that this sort of barren town, this sort of like place that sort of perhaps was once something that time forgot, like a sort of tumbleweed town, based on it must be like a Western sort of influence, really. And that was sort of something that I really wanted. I wanted like breakfast and meeting up and landlines, and there was no real like sort of modernity in it, and just try to make it this world of its own. So that was always in the script, and even some like, the time changes were in the script. Like when they go into hiding, it starts snowing. I'd written that in the script. So a lot of the time and other factors were already part of it, really.
Yeah, you're just waiting for that snow to come. You knew it's going to come anyway because it's Scotland, but
I was ready.
Was there times where you thought, I'm never going to get this made?
When we shot a scene out the back door, and there was like 10 of us, and I had quite a few. I'd like opened with like a crane shot, then a dolly on a crane, and then it was a lot of dialogue, but I didn't want to just do close up, and we shot for like 6 hours, and I think we only got half the scenes done, and then we came back, and certain people couldn't make it, and just things were falling apart. And I thought at that point, but I'd already had like 5 scenes shot by that point when I was reviewing them. I was like, there's something here, don't pack it in. So that was the only real moment, and after that it was just a case of, we're going to get it done, and it is what it is when it's finished, really.
Yeah. It was always a vision to put it on the big screen, or was it just to make a movie?
The goal, you know, it's funny because I read about a lot of careers and things like that, and people making their first feature, so I suppose some sort of festival was the goal, and to get it on a big screen. And I think regardless if we got into Glasgow or not, I would have rented a screen and see, because I wrote it for that sort of canvas, you know, a big scale sort of epic with like big shots and the big wide landscapes. So I think that was always part of it. But then when I was really getting to the end of it, and I thought, okay, Glasgow's submission date's here, we're about this stage, I was like, okay, this is the one. And obviously I was going to GFT all the time, and I thought, okay, but I'd never been to a festival or anything like that before, so I didn't really know. So I was sort of trying to stay in touch with them, the festival people that ran the festival, and try to put the feelers out. But I mean, I had no idea if it would get in anywhere.
Yeah, and there must have been, like during the pandemic when you were doing a lot of this, there must have been a lot of setbacks. But that, again, the medium could have closed. Cinemas were closing down. You know what I mean? Were you ever in fear of I'm never going to get this on the big screen, because I don't know if the GFT is still going to be here in 12 months' time, you know?
You know, that I probably should have been thinking like that in some way, but I just thought, I think it's the way, I don't know if you're the same, but when you listen to sort of certain directors and they talk about shooting on film and the medium that they grew up with and like how it's changed, but you know, the way we consume content is so much different, and I do like revere the cinemas and the cinema experience, and the festival just sort of reinforced that. Like when you watch a film with an audience that's been made to be seen with an audience, how much better that is. But I never really thought about things like that. My focus was just on the film and how to make it like the kind of best film possible. But I mean, Edinburgh Film Festival just closed down. The film house shut down just out of nowhere. I think they get called in on like the Monday morning and told to basically get out and get boarded up. So I mean, it's a very real possibility. I mean, I hope it never happens. They managed to stay open and they paid everyone like full pay, Glasgow Film Festival. So I mean, they did a phenomenal job, but it is a scary thing that it could happen. But I don't know. I think there's a lot of people who champion it and realise its importance, and hopefully wouldn't let that happen.
Yeah. And how has the last year been for you from premiering Angry Young Men? Like, how has it been? Was it like sudden burst of a lot of stuff coming in after it and then just quieting down? Has it been a strange experience the whole year, or has it been a beneficial one?
It's been beneficial, but it has been mad. Like, from when we announced it, I found out in the 10th of December last year, I got an email to say we're into Glasgow. So right after, I'd started writing some ideas down for the next script, but I was still in it and I was still sort of like anticipating what was going to happen with the film. So I found out it was going to get into Glasgow, and then I was thinking about, okay, now it's like in terms of how do we promote it when we're allowed to, because I think it's the end of January they announced their programme, so that was the only time I could speak about it. And then when that happened, then it was all about, okay, what's the sort of game plan for getting people excited to see the film, and then the sort of promotional side of it. And then that was intense right up until the festival. And then there was quite a lot of press to do, and then I was doing sort of podcasts and things like that. And then I had like other festivals. There was one in St Andrews Society in LA. That was another festival, so that was on my mind. And then I was writing other things, and then I was working on like a short film. Potentially was going to get funding for that. That didn't happen. And then I was writing my other script. Then I was like moving house, and then like my wife's pregnant, and so there's so much life happening as well. But then I was also thinking about the next projects. But then there was like the youth festival, which was later in the year. So I was sort of like 1 foot in and still with Angry Young Men. So it wasn't really until the very last screening in Inverness, just at the end of last year, where I was like, okay, that's it. And then I stuck it online. I was like, okay, that's done. Draw a line under it.
Yeah. I know, and I'm sorry I'm late to getting you on the podcast and speaking about a film that you've closed the door on. But
no, but it's nice to do that, because I think if it had been at that, it would be the same. I'd be saying the same things if it hadn't been, if I got a bit of time away from it now.
And I was so conscious of asking same things like what inspired you and all those kind of things. I'm like, they've all been asked before. If people want to find that out, go and watch that podcast. But it sounded like you had such a dedication. And was that something that was in you before? Because you would get up before your work, like 4 a.m. I think you said to write, and then you would start your job. Like, was that drive always in you, or was that something that learned because you were like, right, this is what I want to do, this is how I'm going to have to achieve it?
Yeah, I think that's it. I think I never got exam anxiety when I was like a young guy at school. I never worried about school or my future or what university it was going to be or college. I never really cared, to be honest. I didn't know what I was going to do, so I was never invested. And the only time I get nervous or I got that sort of anxiety was when I found something that I really cared about in terms of like as a career thing anyway, or just as a passion. So the only time was because I think you realise what you could lose, I suppose, and what's at stake, because you really feel like this is what I should be doing myself, and I should be working this hard. I've got this bit of time here. What am I doing? Am I reading? Am I watching a film? Am I writing? So that was like all consuming. So I think by the time I'd been writing the script, like when I was getting up before work, I think it was more just right, you need to sort of like kick it up a notch, or you need to get this sort of change in routine. So I think that just kind of came naturally because I wanted to make something that I was really proud of. So it just came from that rather than an external thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because you always wonder sometimes, like, you look at your parents and your parents were driven, so you're like, that's where you get that from. But creatives tend to be a lot different like that. But your writing process, have you got like a certain thing? Do you create a playlist and have songs in your head when you're writing, or have you just got a structure of how you do things? What's your process?
Sometimes I'll sit down, there'll be a lot of note taking, it'll be trying to figure things out. Sometimes it'll be like nuts and bolts in terms of this person goes here, what's happening here plot wise, just sort of scaffolding. But then a lot of the time it's just listen to music and you see images and then you realise that's that. And then something that might just be just sitting writing, but I think you need to sort of just be at the desk and writing for it to happen, if you know what I mean, because you can have an idea in your head and it won't mature for a year if you don't actually force yourself to get it on the page, and then you realise maybe I don't have what I thought I had. Because it's a great thing when you've got just potential, because this could be anything, but then when you have to commit it down and you go, right, this is what I actually have and here's what I'm missing, and that's writing. You just bang your head against the wall.
Yeah, I'm an ideas man. I've always had an interest in writing my own thing. I'd go and watch movies and I'd be like, I can do better. I could tweak that and make it a better movie. I know that sounds a bit pretentious, but
No,
like
honest, but
sometimes you're watching something and you're like, a wee tweak here or there would have fixed it. Maybe that's just my taste, but I'd always get inspiration from anywhere. Sitting on a train, I'd be like, right, I've got an idea, I'd put that down, but my brain can't focus on the one project. So I would get an idea for one thing, and then a completely different project would come into my head, and I'd be like, oh fuck, I don't know where to start. So I've got about 100 ideas and notes on my phone of just little bits of things, but I just don't have that dedication to sit down and be like, right, here's what we're going to work on. That is where I give you props, because that's hard to do, to sit down and be like, right, start to finish and properly tailor everything. That's very, very hard to do.
I think it's difficult because whether it's music or whether it's films, say you love Terminator or you love action films or something, right? And you're trying to make the best version of that, but you also have this other love, and you're almost trying to like throw the kitchen sink in and be like, I want this, but I want this. And then it's that sort of grass is greener. Even with ideas, it was like, you get sick of that and you realise, well, what I need is this element, and that takes you off somewhere else.
Yeah.
But I think that's the hardest bit, is really banging your head against the wall and being like, no, stop fucking about, finish this. Like, where is this going? Force yourself to be like, right, get it done. And that could be the hard part, because that's not glamorous. Like, the best bits of the idea is that rush when you're like, oh, imagine what this could be. You see this one image and it says 1,000 things to you.
Yeah.
But it's that when you have to commit it to paper and you have to read it back and you realise what it actually is, that can be hard. But that's writing.
Yeah. And I think it was Fincher that said he loves writing himself into a corner, because that gives him a way to be like, right, what can I think of? Which is quite an interesting way to look at it. But
same with Breaking Bad, but it's almost like if you have written yourself into a corner, then the audience will be in that position, which is the great thing. Whereas if you think you're above the audience, or you think you've got a higher intellect than the audience, then you're done, because if you know the outcome before you start, then guaranteed the audience will as well. So I think that's why writing is so difficult, because you have to go the hero's journey sort of thing. You have to go on that as a writer, as well as your character has to go on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I did like a kind of college course. It was maybe 8 Saturdays that I went, and it was over in the south side, and it was just very much like basic, like how to write a script, like internal, external, and what's gone on, and blah blah blah. And that really helped me. But at the same time, it was pretty much like, oh, go and make a 2-minute video on your iPhone. And I'm like, all right. And it was just kind of difficult for me, because I was like, it's going to look like shit no matter what. So I was kind of like, I thought I was going to be dealing with cameras and finding out how to work them. And it was more like, right, what is this? We're watching something, and we're watching Katy Perry's Roar music video, and she was like, what's the director trying to do in this? And it never occurred to me to watch a music video and be like, the director's got a vision, and this is like all being written, and it's basically a short film. And it opened my mind to lots of stuff like that. You start watching music videos and you think, oh, what's the story here? And you try and catch on to it. And it was fascinating, but I probably wasn't at the right point in my life to be doing it as well. I kind of was like, don't know if I thought it's not enough education for me to make me go and make my own film. But then life happened, and I never went down that route. I'm now doing podcasting. So
it's funny, but I think timing's a big thing in who you speak to and when you speak to them. I remember my auntie, like she's pretty like remarkable. She lives in California. She comes from Southampton, like grew up dirt poor and like blah blah blah, and she travelled the world. And she was in Australia at one point, and somebody said something to her, like said to read her palm or something. That was a friend of hers, or just joking around, and said something, oh, here's where your destiny is or something. And she was like, oh, I want to do this. And he said something like, I think you could do better than that. And her just hearing that set her off on this full new journey. And then she went to Berkeley and got her PhD, and she still like travelled the world, but it was like the right words at the right time. So I not to get like airy-fairy about it, but I think that there's a big thing about timing and where you are. And
yeah, and I'm figuring that out now as well. Like stumbling into a podcast studio in Glasgow, thinking it's just a podcast studio, end up meeting a guy that the pioneer in the medium, and he's now a mentor to me. And it's like one of those things that it's just fallen into place. I've met the right people. I've reached out to people like yourself. You've come on, and it's just like, I'm exactly where I need to be, and this is exactly what I need to be doing.
does it feel that way?
Yeah,
That's great.
I mean, as much as I'm not a confident person in terms of presenting and in front of the cameras, and I'll get there. But you know, I sat down and recorded my first session and was like, this is exactly what I want to do. As soon as it came out of it, I was like, this is it. And I'd flirted with so many different things. I was a singer in a band, wanted to pursue acting at one point, wanted to write my own stuff. You know, like there's so much creativity in me, and nothing got that. This is for you until I sat down and did my first session.
How funny is that? You hear all these stories, like even like Seinfeld or all these like comedians going up on stage and bombing, but they knew that's where they should be. And it's funny how you could maybe go on and kill your first set, be like, I don't see there's not like a sort of potential there for me. And it's funny how even if you're not exactly where you want to be, then you just feel there's a call in there for some reason. It's funny that.
But it's motivating me because it's like every single time I'm doing it, I'm getting that little bit better at it, and I'm getting a little bit more confidence, and I'm like, I can see where it's going. It's just I'm just trying to enjoy the journey basically, because it was an idea that I came up with, and now it's a thing on Spotify and stuff like that. And I'm still like, what?
It's phenomenal, man.
It's crazy, isn't it? And I never thought sitting down and talking to people would be something that I would pursue as a career.
It makes sense with all your interests as well. It's like combines like a polymath, like you just got an interest in everything, so it makes sense when you look back, but you need to arrive there, don't you, for it to make sense?
I know, and everybody's been so great with me. Like I've met so many people that have just come out of my life and they're now like friends for life. It's so strange. Like they were strangers before and now they're like, how you getting on? Texting me all the time, and even James and I just became bros. Like you're just making friends, and it's so surreal. But enough about my shite. I loved that you cited Christopher Nolan's Fallen as one of your inspirations. That is a movie that nobody ever tends to deep dive into, but it's fantastic.
No, it's great. It's great. It was even before I'd seen it properly. It was just the style it was made. I was aware of how he made it. And I thought that's the way to do it. Like, what do you have? What can you get? And use that really. Like, because even though we were talking about that earlier, that another thing when you're in these groups or when you're around other people that are in the same industry, there's so much complaining, and there's so many. Like, as much as I do agree that there should be more funding and everything else, like just get it done. Do you know what I mean? Like you did with this. That you don't like wait for permission and be like, oh, I wish I had, because that's just. It's never happening. It doesn't happen in any field that you have to provide something before you get it back. Yeah. And I just think when I seen him get out and just making it, you're like, that's how you do it. You just sort of put your stamp on it. And even Tarantino, he had like a failed first feature that he abandoned, like My Best Friend's Birthday, it's called. And even that, at the end of it, he wasn't like, oh God, like the industry's like screwed me over. It was just like, oh, I learned so much there. And then you come out with Reservoir Dogs. So it's just like, by doing it, you're going to learn so much. That's what I felt with Following.
Yeah, and I love the foreshadowing of Batman in it, because the Batman logo's on the door.
Oh, is it?
And one of the scenes, like he goes up to the apartment and for some reason he's got a Batman logo as his front door. And I was just like, how mental is it that he's made that film, probably thought that's a cool thing to shoot. And then all those years later, he's known for 3 brilliant Batman movies.
That's phenomenal. I didn't know that.
Questionable the third one for me.
That opening sequence is one of the best that's ever been put in a film. That plane sequence, man. I just think that's with Bane when was it in Inverness they were filming it.
Do you know what hit? That part of the plane fell off and hit somebody's house.
Did it?
During production. Like something, maybe part of the wing came off and it like totally demolished somebody's house.
Oh my God.
But it never there was nobody there round about the house, so it was like a freak accident.
Oh my God.
But it never really got spoke about.
I never heard that.
But it was just mental that like it's just that plane landing in your house. Be like, what the fuck? Christopher Nolan's just making a movie.
Tom Hardy's up there. Jeez.
But like again, like he shot in black and white as well. Like, was that ever something you maybe wanted to do with Angry Young Men at all, or was it the color that like was too important to the movie because the color's everywhere?
The color was always sort of coded in the film. I think that's another thing when if you do consider yourself a writer director, I knew the images were coming to me. It wasn't just words and action on my script, if you know what I mean. I was thinking, here's what this will be and here's what this moment will feel like. And also I didn't want it to be like a Drake sort of poverty film, if you know what I mean. Like I don't think Following is that, or like, I don't. It's not to disparage like those types of films, if you know what I mean. Because I get a lot out of them, but I just knew that this was going to be a sort of surreal, and I wanted it to be full of colour. Like The Conformist was like a film that I really like, and there's a DP called Vittorio Storaro, and what he did with colour, I was just like, that's how you do it, and I was just trying to experiment with that. So colour was always a part of it.
And I guess if you did the black and white thing, you would kind of just be put in that box of fridge and close. Like Peter Mullen's done it. You know what I mean? It's been done and it's been done well. So it's kind of like the black and white drop is mostly, I think, to hide budget issues. I think and lighting and that. But I just always curious that people like Chris Nolan used that as their first. Maybe that was just, I don't know why I used black and white. Maybe
It was colour. I think because. The lighting balance, his main light source was natural light, so he put everyone by windows. But then if you have see for example right here beside you, you've got the blue and orange. Like if you had a artificial light here, but then daylight coming in, there would be like a colour clash.
Right.
So I think it was to get away from that. So all you would see is the light on it.
Right.
But it also lent itself to the sort of noir element of the film. So I think multiple reasons, but I think it was mainly like a budget thing.
Yeah. And before we finish up, I've got a couple of wee quick questions that are brain teasers for you. And the first one is, I'd like to ask for your movie journey. 5 films in your movie journey that, like, for the first film that you watched that you remember being like, I watched that and it stuck with me, to the last film you watched and loved, and then in between's up to you.
To start, like the one that had a huge impact when I think about being really young, E.T. probably, when I think about having an emotional impact and like crying my eyes out. And then I had no idea of lots of like film craft or anything at that point, but then when you look back, it's even like more impressive. But just the kind of raw emotional aspect to that of being a kid, and just the divorce and everything like that, and having a best friend and leaving, but then the magic of it. So I would say that's probably where I can remember. And then as I was a wee bit older, The Big Lebowski is probably one, because that was like we had the VHS of that and a ton of others, and I think that's been more when I was like maturing in my sense of humour. And then again, it's one of those films that it's easy to overlook and just see it as a sort of like comedy, but like the craft in it and the shots and what Deakins did with like certain camera rigs and even just like the complexity of it is like it's phenomenal. So
Deakins is the man.
He's the main man.
He totally is.
You just look at his films and then when you listen, like, that's another actually podcast I should have said, the Team Deakins podcast. He's got a really good one with his wife.
I didn't know that. I need to check that out.
It's really, really good. And when you listen to him, he's just like still a student. Like he has filmmakers on. He's like, so what was it you did there? I love what you did. And you're like, you are the master of like DPs, and you're still this curious brain, like this sort of like still trying to figure things out. Even though so Deakins is a man. So Big Lebowski. Number 3. Probably Apocalypse Now. And because I saw it really, really young on an old VHS, and then I watched it again later, and then I saw Redux, which is like a recut version of it, and then I saw Final Cut like very recently, and it's just one of those films that's got like a sort of power to it that you just can't really put any words, and it's through the cinema. It's that guy I actually mentioned, Vittorio Storaro, this Italian DP, he shot it, and then obviously Coppola, Brando, who's like, you just worship the guy and worship all of them, but it's one of those films that just, it's the story, it's how it's shot, it's that thing you can't articulate about cinema, where it's just the mood it makes you feel and where it takes you. The soundtrack, the opening, Walter Murch, what he did with the propellers, that sort of that opening shot, and then the doors kicking in, just a mad power to it.
Just that appeals to all of your senses, doesn't it?
That's what I think. That's what it is. It's like that thing that cinema does. It's like the music, it's the performance, it's the look, the writing, and and then the message. It's like the bare plot, what happens, this journey upriver, this sort of Odyssey journey, but then it's like what it's saying, and then even when you go back and you read Eleanor Coppola's book, and then you see her film about a filmmaker's apocalypse, the behind the scenes, and then that just makes me love it even more, because you see he was just putting everything out there and he was just giving himself up to whatever was going to happen, trying his hardest, and that just makes me love it more. So I would say that's number 3. Number 4, probably the master, I would say, Paul Thomas Anderson.
Love Paul Thomas Anderson.
See that as well. That's one of those things, but it's like when cinema does it, and it's like you see his earlier films, like say Boogie Nights, for example, which is like so much like I'm the director and watch what I can do with the camera, and it's just so like full of life, and it's just like so vibrant. And then you see him in The Master, and it's a lot of it's just like simple tracking shots, and it's all performance, and you realise like where he's came in his career, and like he can do everything, like he can do it all, he can whirl the camera anywhere he wants, but he chooses to do this, like it ends on that static shot, and Philip Seymour Hoffman singing "I Want to Get You" in a slow boat to China, and I remember after it, like even now, like I watched that scene over and over again, and I'm just going, how are you doing this? Like every film, he's got one scene in it where you're just like in Phantom Thread, it's when his mother comes and appears as a ghost, and that music Never Cursed kicks in. There Will Be Blood and Inherent Vice, and you're just looking at it going, you get this so much, and you're working me in a way that I don't really understand. But it's like these people are working at such a high level.
The Master's almost like him saying, "I'm the Master, follow me." And like Joaquin Phoenix performance in that, Philip Seymour Hoffman's performance in that, like it's just like a juggernaut in it,
in every level. And then the how it looks as well. Like I think it was like 65 or something it was shot on, or 70, I can't remember. But the colour, the skin tones, the look of it, it's just like great drama. You think of it in a certain way, and then people do it in a way that's so unconventional, and you're like, and it's got a mad mysterious power to it, and you're just like, what's going on here? And you never get tired of going back to it. And maybe the filmmaker doesn't even know, but they're just chasing a feeling. So The Master, say number 4.
Brilliant.
Number 5, in terms of the last one, where I was like, this is like a total mind bender, not in a sort of plot way where I don't understand it. It's a film called Hard to Be a God. This Russian filmmaker, I think it got made years ago but didn't get released until 2013. And it's Alexei German, I think, is the director. But it's like this black and white film, and it's shot like a Tarkovsky film. It's like beautiful, but it's set in this other world. But it's almost like a medieval world where these scientists have went over and become like king of these idiots or these morons who are like squelching about in the mud. And it's so bizarre and it's so powerful, and it's like the images are so strong. I remember just like, it's one of those ones again with like The Master where you walk out and you're sort of rubbing your head, and I'm just going like, oh, what was that? And that's sort of what I kind of, every time I go to watch a film, I'm hoping it's my new favourite film, and I want to be made feel like that. Which can make writing really difficult because you see these unconventional ways that it's done, and you're like, there are no rules to this game. These people understand it inside out, and then it's about how they shine through in this odd way. It just blows my mind. So I would say that's number 5.
Brilliant. That was class. Thank you for sharing that. I know movies are one of those ones that, like, if somebody says, what's your top 5 movies, you'd be like, fuck, I don't know. But your journey, like, what was the first film you watched to the last film? I thought was quite interesting. We spoke about that before we started recording, like, not giving a fuck about what people think about your taste. Your taste, and you enjoy it. And for me, that I feel like there's a rite of passage with films that I'm starting to pick up on, that when you get to a certain age, it's like you watch Pulp Fiction, you watch Reservoir Dogs, you watch Trainspotting, and you've got that adolescence, and then you watch like Apocalypse Now. It's like there's almost like a rite of passage of it leads you on to the next one. And I feel like a lot of people get the same experience of when you get to like 15, you're watching the Trainspotting, and then you just kind of go on a journey. So that's why I thought it was quite interesting to do it that way.
No, definitely. It's funny as well because even as like a filmmaker or an aspiring filmmaker, like I'd watched a lot of films as a young guy, and kind of varied films, but then when I was starting to think about, I wanted to kind of know everything about it, and so then you're like, who are the masters? So I got like a Fellini, a Bergman, a Kurosawa, Wells box set. You're just going through everything, and then it's the same again. You're trying on all these different films, like what fits, and there is a kind of level of like, everyone had the Pulp Fiction poster, the Trainspotting poster. So I think everyone goes through that, and when no one in your class has seen it, then it's like this edgelord thing where it's like, I know this, but then you kind of resent that a few years later. It's like this thing in like Film Bro Twitter, and it's like, oh, are you still into that? And then you come back round and you realise that, no, that's actually great on its own merit, and you get over all that bullshit about like who thinks what about it, and oh, now that this is cool, I'm not going to like this anymore. Which luckily I've not really felt that about with any films, but there are films that I go back to and I'm like, that's actually just like a fantastic film, and see it for what it is without any of the noise.
My next question is, what's your guilty pleasure movie franchise or movie? Something that, I don't know.
Guilty pleasure. See, I don't really feel guilty about anything.
I'm trying, I was about to say, kind of contradicts the last question, doesn't it?
But it's a good one, because I'm thinking, is there something that I stick on, and I'm like, I just love that for what it is. I think maybe it's like, again, not guilty, but like just Will Ferrell in a film. I just think he's the funniest guy alive, even if it's not a great film and I'm not like really enjoying it. He'll just say something or a wee inflection, like Daddy's Home or something. I remember I was like watching it, and they're just like one odd scene, and he just catches you. and it's just got a mad magic to it, and you're just like, oh, fair play, you know, you just accept it for what it
It's
is.
so fucking funny. Like, I think Step Brothers has to be in my top movies, not because it's a great movie, but it's just the way it makes you feel. You feel just full of like joy watching it from start to finish, and it's very rare that you can do that.
Definitely.
But it's all down to him, you know. And John C. Reilly's fantastic as well. He can do anything, you know what I mean?
No,
He can do the serious stuff, or he can do the kind of comedy stuff. So my guilty pleasure is Fast and Furious.
Oh, really? That's
It's
a good one.
one franchise you can just stick on. And the reason I got into it was I got sacked from my job and working in a call center, right? And I basically didn't want to tell my parents that I'd got sacked, so I went into work every day wearing my suit every day and just kicked about the town for like the full day. So I'd just go to Cineworld. I got a Cineworld card and just went and watched every movie that was out. And the Fast and Furious 6 was out at the time. And I can remember just going to see it thinking, I've got 3 hours to kill or whatever. And I sat down and I was just immediately gripped by it. And I was just like, I came in with no expectations. I thought this is going to be terrible. And I just loved it. And then I went back and watched all the other ones. I'd seen the first one when it first came out because, you know, as a wee guy, you're kind of cars and all that, you're daft about stuff like that. But I just went back and revisited them. They were just one of those things that just give you everything on that it says in the tin. You know what I mean? You're like, it's so unbelievable and corny and shit, but it's everything that's great about cinema.
That's like the best feeling in the world when you no expectation and that film just gets you with that. Like, there's nothing better than that, and sometimes you just want to know nothing about it, and you hope that every film does that to you, where it just catches you and it's got a mad magic that pulls you in.
Yeah.
But again, it's like where you are at the time and like how you're feeling at the time, and it's like music as well, or certain smells. It's just something that you had to hear, I had to see, and it's linked to you now forever, probably.
I know. I watch a guy on YouTube called Chris Stuckman, and he's kind of like reviews. He was one of the review guys that would just sit and watch everything and give you a review on it. And he's now making his own movie. And he was saying that when John Wick came out, all of his group of friends were going in to see one film, and he was like, "Nah, I'm going to see John Wick." And they were all like, "What, that Keanu Reeves film? Nah, that looks trash." And it was like, I proved them wrong, didn't I? Because they're fucking phenomenal.
Oh, they're huge, aren't they, man?
Yeah, they're like the Fast and Furious on crack, basically, aren't they?
Actually, it was like the stunt director then became a director based on the strength of that film because the stunts were so good in it.
Aye, and you can tell, and he just tries to outdo himself each time. Like, apparently the stunts in the fourth one are just like unbelievable.
They're saying it's the best one.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody says that when it's like a new franchise in it. Oh, it's the best one yet. But like, some of the stunts that I was seeing behind the scenes, I like behind the scenes stuff as well. Like, I used to watch all the DVD stuff when I was a kid, and just hearing and seeing what they were up to on that set is inspiring. Like pushing bodies to the limit and seeing what worked.
See, that's when it's great, you know, complain about if Marvel were doing that, it's almost like if they were pushing the technology and pushing like the sort of craft of it. Like these stunt guys, you're just like, look at how inventive they're being and what they're doing with the camera. That's phenomenal. You've got nothing against big budget films, of course not.
Yeah.
It's just when it becomes stale or when it becomes this sort of template that you just renew. And when CG guys are getting pushed for no money and overworked and all that, that's when you sort of get sickened by it. But I mean, nobody wants the blockbuster to go away. You just want them to be, they want to take advantage of it.
Yeah, I think there's a stunt guy called Scott Atkins. I don't know if you've ever seen him, but he looks like Bruce Wayne, and he's the height of Batman, or he's maybe taller, but he would be a perfect Batman, and just let him go and do his own thing. You know what I mean? Put a stunt guy as Batman. You know, you don't really need to do a huge amount. You know what I mean? That's Bruce Wayne's the big one for me. Like the last Batman movie, I didn't lean towards Robert Pattinson's Bruce Wayne. It wasn't. Bale was my Bruce Wayne. Well, Kevin Conroy was my Batman, but on film, I think Christian Bale nailed Bruce Wayne and Batman, and I think Keaton didn't. Yeah, it was either. I don't have a huge relationship with. It's kind of nostalgia based for Batman 1 and Batman Returns. I loved Batman Returns more because I saw that as a kid more, but I appreciate obviously Jack Nicholson's performance in it. But I always felt Michael Keaton just doesn't feel like Batman to me, and people put him in such a pedestal. But I don't know if that's because it was the first one outside of Adam West that people were like, "Oh no, he's my Batman." But Bale was my Batman because he nailed both Bruce and Batman for me. But yeah, enough about that. So have you got anything else in the pipeline? What's next?
Finishing scripts, really. Got a script I'm just finishing just now. called Anyone Can Get It, and that's what I'm working on next. So that's exciting. I'm excited about that. And when that's done, we'll see what happens. But then I've got other ideas for scripts, so I'm just going to keep working on them and see what happens, really.
And your missus is pregnant, so you setting that deadline of like before the baby's due to have it done.
That in my head, but then it's that old thing as well. Even with writing, it's like you can do all these things. You can get up before work. You can set all these things in place, and you can be like, right, I'm going to be here. I'm going to write for X amount of hours. But a lot of the time, it'll come when it comes, And I hate that because I want to be like sort of results orientated, but then you realise it's like you just need to kind of love the process and like, really enjoy what you're doing and sort of just try and enjoy writing. So that's really what I'm focused on. And then whatever happens, I'm sure I'll be up in all hours and I'll be sleep deprived, but make it work, man.
You're used to that now, so
yeah.
Can you tell us anything about it, or do you want to keep it under wraps?
It's sort of inspired by the original idea for it. Just came, I had a few images in mind. I was listening to like a Richie Havens song. It's like an extended version of Freedom, and I just sort of saw these images about this young guy getting carried by like his grandmother, like after some sort of traumatic event, like being carried away. And then I was really into sort of like Frankenstein and the Greek sort of I don't even know if it's classed as a tragedy, but the Minotaur, sort of like this freak getting kept in a labyrinth and been born as a monster, but it's not been their fault. So sort of Frankenstein as well. So the idea of it is this kid's born between like two warring families, like a crime family and this sort of normal family, and he's born into it and he's raised by his maternal side, and his paternal side are all sort of like pretty heavy in the game, but he's against them, and it's really about them trying to retire and him causing a ruckus basically. So that's the idea, the general idea. Sounds
amazing. I'm looking forward to that, and you need to come back on and tell us all about that.
I'm game for that, mate.
If I'm still kicking about.
You will be, mate. You will be.
But I don't know you, and I said this to you when I was messaging you. I don't know you too well, but I'm so proud of you.
Thank you,
seeing
mate.
What you've done. You've had a goal, you've grafted, you've achieved that goal, you've done everything you said you were going to do, and everything else from here on out is a bonus. So like I'm really proud of you, and I hope we stay in touch. And
definitely, mate.
Thank you very much for coming on as well. I know it was not the most convenient time, but like I really appreciate you coming on.
No, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you all for listening at home, and we'll see you next Tuesday.